So your brand name is probably the most central asset of your brand. It's the first thing that people hear when they hear about you the first time. You know, whenever you're communicating your business, most likely your salon or spa's name will be somewhere on there. So it's important that we get this right. Now, I know many of you taking this course already have a business up and running. But also that people are coming in taking this course because they're in the planning phase of opening a salon or a spa. And that's why I wanted to include this module, because it's probably more for those who are just in the phase of opening. For sure, there could be things in here that are relevant also for you if you have an established name already, to help you think about how you can maybe use that name better in your branding. But yes, it's really for those who are starting up in the planning phase and needs to come up with a name. So what I want to focus on here is really how you do that and how you can land on a name that will stand the test of time for your business and really represent you in the right way. So the way we're going to do this is really to start with a brainstorm. So we need to get as many options as we possibly can on the table. And really when we do the brainstorm, what's important is that we don't like judge the ideas during that brainstorm phase, but really just like throw in different names that could work, could not work, but not overthink it. Just here's the quantity that matters. Like, let's get a lot of them down and then we'll judge them later on, okay? Below this video, you'll find a workbook. In that workbook, there is a 3-step process that I'll take you through for kind of how to do that brainstorm exercise to really like help get your thinking going as well as part of that brainstorm exercise. So really that workbook has everything you need to do in terms of how you like empty your head for ideas, how you can look to other name ideas for inspiration and ideas, and how you can kind of pull out what is unique about your business and try to use all that as stimuli to come up with name ideas, okay? So that's kind of the brainstorm phase. You'll find instructions in the workbook for how to do that exercise that I strongly suggest that you go through to make sure that you get as many options as you possibly can on the table. So what I want to focus on now in this video is then the process for how we actually judge if these names are good or not. So I've defined like 7 different questions that you can ask yourself as you go through that list after you've done the brainstorm. So really start with that, start in the workbook, do the brainstorm so you get some options on the table. And then I'll lead you through 7 questions that you can ask yourself to see, is this a good name? Will this work? Will it stand the test of time? Okay, so question number 1, and I have in the worksheet here next to me, and that you really should ask yourself is, do people immediately understand what I'm about? You know, does the name signal that, you know? Because it's likely that they will see the name in a context, and you want, you know, when they do that, that they also understand what you're about, and, you know, if what you offer is relevant for them, you want, you know, them to engage with you. And it's quite likely that you land on a name that is like a really cool name or something that sounds, you know, very unique to you and so on. Which is great, but if you have a name that doesn't really signal what type of business you are, I would just encourage you to complement your name with, you know, a description of your salon as well. So this can be a tagline or just like extending the name by complementing it with, you know, Italian barbershop or organic hair salon, or, you know, I would go back to that proposition that we worked on in the brand strategy to see like what is it really that you offer, and like complement your salon name with that to make sure that when they hear your name that also comes across, okay? So that's the point number 1. Make sure that it's immediately obvious for the person seeing this what your business is about. Point number 2 that you can check also to see if this is a name that will stand the test of time and work well for you is whether it's easy to pronounce the name and also easy to spell it. Because in our industry, word of mouth marketing is important, and if you have a name that like people cannot really pronounce and say to each other, that might sound really cool, and you know, you're the boss, you can decide to also just stick with that. But I just want you to be cautious that could like harm you from like your word of mouth marketing, that it's more difficult for people to kind of talk about you. And also when people hear about you, if they're going to go to Google to look you up and to find your website and to learn more about you, if it's like super difficult to spell that, that could also like hindering you. So if you're looking at a few different options, that could be a factor that says that like this name we won't go with, because it's just going to be so difficult in communication for people to actually be able to spell and to really pronounce this properly. So that would be point number 2, like, is it easy to pronounce, is it easy to spell? Point number 3 would be, does it fit your brand character? So as we work through like the brand strategy workshops, we spend some time on your character, right? So, you know, again, going back to that, imagining that your brand or your salon or spa is a person, like what type of person is that, right? And also then what type of name would that person have, right? Or what type of name would fit the character of your salon? You know, because you want something that fits with that, so that it doesn't feel off with your branding. If you have like a super cute name, but you really like a cool barbershop, you know, wouldn't really work. I think that comes quite naturally, you know, like when you judge the names, but that's something to have in mind, is the character of your brand, and to make sure that that transcends also into the name that you choose for your business. So point number 4 would be, is the name unique to you? So here you can also go back to the positioning exercise that we did earlier, when we also looked at competitors in your area, and obviously also look at their names, because you want to avoid having a name that is very similar to what other salons are called in your area. You want something that stands out to make you sound unique in that context. So looking at competition is good. You probably also want to dig into the brand story and the story of your salon and spa, your purpose, and all these elements that, again, we worked on in the brand strategy workshops, that informs like what makes you unique. And is there a way that you can incorporate your story and your purpose already in the name of your salon, which would be fantastic, right? Having that really reinforces the story. It's good like for the word of mouth marketing, when people hear your name and it's like, okay, why is it called that? It sparks stories and makes people want to talk about you, which is really good for your marketing and for your branding. But I know that this can be quite difficult and it's a lot to ask, so I would just say that is great if it's there. I wouldn't necessarily put that as like a judging factor. If you find a name that really, you know, fits you in one way or another, or sounds right for what you want to do, but maybe the link back to your story is not perfect, we can probably live with that, because it's a lot to ask that really like your name would represent your story. So, you know, I leave that to you to kind of find the right balance, but finding an element of uniqueness in the name is of course good. Okay. And so I would really say like those would be like really 4 things I would look closely at when picking a name for your salon or spa. And then there's a few more things you can also look at, but I would say those I would look closer at. So what I would do next is actually consider your target client. Obviously you have your targeting client in mind when you did your whole brand strategy, and probably that it has influenced also the previous questions that we asked. But something you can do also is to actually test your name with your target client. So if you have a person in the salon that is well representing the audience that you want to attract, like that type of client, show her the names, or tell her the names, and just kind of see how she reacts to them. If she jumps on something and thinks that sounds cool and start talking about it, then maybe she's just like nice. But you know, you need to kind of read the person. What she says doesn't say as much as her reactions, in my experience. So you know, try to really like test out the names with her to see how she reacts, because in the end, you know, when people hear and see your name, it's like a split-second gut feeling kind of thing how they react to it. So you can only get that gut feeling also the first time. So really, like when you show them, like try to read immediately how is that person like reacting back to you on that first time she heard it. Like what was her gut feeling at that stage? Because it's that gut feeling that we want to get to. It's easy to sit like with this list that I'm going through now and like intellectualize and think about the rationale behind the name and all that. You know, that's a good exercise to go through. But in the end, it is that gut feeling that is the most important. So like testing it with her, obviously also with yourself. So when you have like your list, you filtered it down using some of these questions, like you put that aside and you come back to it, and when you just look at it, what does your gut feeling tell you immediately, right? that is important when choosing your name. So trust your gut and also test it with your target client for what does she or he think about your name. If you're looking for more ways to start filtering down your name, because maybe you have a lot of options still on the table, what you could look at is also whether it's like visually appealing, meaning like there will come a point where you want to translate your name into a logo type or something like that, and just some letters just work better than others, and maybe the length of the name and so on, like depending on how you want your like logo and the execution and the visual execution of your name to be. That could inform also like which name would be the best one to use. Like if you want to use a sort of letter combination and so on, some names just make that work in an easier way. So that's another thing that you can look at if you still need to filter down your options more. And finally, what I would consider also when choosing a name is if you can find a good available domain name. So like funny story, like the Salon business, which you're familiar with, like the whole reason why it's called that is because I found thesalonbusiness.com available and I thought it was a good domain name. So that was how that name came about. That's the story behind that. But obviously I'm an online business, the Salon business is the blog and YouTube and all that. So it's all online. If you're a local business, that's the importance of the domain name is not as strong. That's why I'm kind of including it here more as another thing to consider if you want to filter down your list. Because the thing is, like most businesses now are online. It's really difficult to find available domain names. I mean, there are no available domain names below 5 letters anymore. At least the .com addresses, and most of the common name. I mean, all of that is gone. So you probably need to play with that and to find a combination where you have like your name, salon, or hair, or like city name afterwards or something like that in order to find a domain name that works. So that is still something to look at, because your domain name, and especially now and also in the years to come, becomes a very like important brand asset for you as well, and will be very visible when you communicate. So that's a little bit more of a nice to have than some of the previous options, but could still be a factor to look at when picking your name. Okay, so that was the 7 questions that I recommend you ask yourself when going through the list. Now, before we close, I just also wanted to touch base on like using your name as the salon name, because this is a very common approach. And obviously, if we think about those questions, your name would tick a lot of the boxes. Like, does it make you unique and reinforce your story? Of course it does. It's like it's your name, right? And easy to pronounce and spell and fitting with your brand's character, all those things would typically work very well with like actually using your own name, and in particular because it ties so strongly to your story. So using your name, I think, is always a good option to use in different ways or form. So the only caution, if anything, I would add to using your own name would be like if you one day plan to sell your business. Like if it's your name is the actual brand name that you're building, could be a little bit more difficult because it's so attached to you as a person. So it's more difficult to get someone else to like buy that brand from you. Not necessarily a problem. I mean, I worked as a brand manager on Sassoon, for example, from Vidal Sassoon, and that brand, and that is living on obviously beyond him. And I mean, there's many more examples like that. Where this is done well, especially when they become bigger brands. But if you kind of like building a brand that becomes known in your local area, but doesn't really become super big, and you want to sell that, this could be something that makes it a little bit more problematic to kind of to do that. Just something to have in mind. And then the other part I would say is also, I think your brand strategy and what we work through becomes almost even more important. Because what you want with your brand is for this to also like motivate and inspire your team, right? So that they feel they're working for something bigger, they're working for the brand. And if your brand is just like about you're not clear on your brand strategy, but kind of the brand is you kind of thing, that might be more difficult to get other people to buy in and to kind of carry that flag, because it's like it's not them, right? So I would say also when you choose your own name, I think it just becomes more important to crystallize, okay, so what's the purpose of the brand and the values of the brand and so on, which transcends beyond you as a person, just so that you kind of, so that other people can also feel that they can take ownership of that brand and carry it forward. Now, those are probably minor points, but since it's a very common approach, I just wanted to comment on that as well, just so you have like some perspective when choosing your name and if you're sticking with your own name as well. So that's what I wanted to cover in this video on how to name a salon or a spa, because yes, it is an important part. It's a question that I get a lot actually. So yeah, wanted to cover that in this one. But really, you have the workbook. It's quite thorough with all the exercise and all the examples. So I really strongly recommend you also look at that workbook and go through that. And I'm sure you will land on a good name to support your brand and your business for the years to come.